Okay, so hello, welcome everyone again, and thank you for participating in this first webinar of our project AI Inclusion. My name is Isabel Martinez. I work for Erasmus Learning Academy and I am the project coordinator. However, for today, I'm leaving the floor to our Polish partners who were in charge of organizing this webinar. So I leave the floor to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabel. My name is Małgorzata and I work as a psychologist in Zespół Szkolno-Przedszkolny in Kaszów. And we are responsible for organization of today's webinar. I'm really happy, I'm really excited to see so many participants from different countries. So thank you again for being with us. But before we move to the main session, to the main topic of this webinar, I would like to briefly explain you the context of our meeting, so why we are here. This webinar is a result of Erasmus Plus project with the title AI for Inclusion, Empowering Teachers to Support Neurodivergent and ASD Students through AI-enhanced personalized learning experiences. So the title is quite complex, quite long. However, in simple words, we can say that the mission of our project is to create more supportive and more friendly, more inclusive environment for our students through the usage of artificial intelligence. The project is coordinated by Erasmus Learning Academy in Italy. Please, if we have a small problem with the presentation, so we will try to share the presentation once again. All right, please bear with me for one moment, as we have important information there. Can you see the presentation again? Perfect.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, perfect. So let's move to the next slide. So as I said, the entire project is coordinated by our friends from Italy, Erasmus Learning Academy, in cooperation with 5 other partners, schools and organizations from Spain, Serbia, Portugal, Poland, and Romania. We had already chance to meet all together in January in Bologna, where we had very I would say very good discussion. We brainstormed on the activities dedicated for this project. We had a great time there. The project started in September 2025 and it's gonna last for 36 months. And on the screen you can see the link to our website. The website is already active, so I strongly encourage you to connect, to check it out. You can find a lot of useful information about the project. So here you can see the full list of all partners that will be working on this project. And let me explain you our objectives. So our objectives are mainly focused on a few different areas, like raising awareness on neurodiversity and autism, fostering teachers' competencies, empowering and inspiring teachers in usage of artificial intelligence for inclusion, fostering inclusion of students with neurodivergence, and fostering international cooperation. The target group are students of secondary schools aged from 14 to 18 with neurodivergence, especially with ASD, teachers, support professionals, and teacher trainers. And as you can see, we planned a lot of very interesting activities to deliver our objectives, to complete them. For example, awareness campaign on neurodiversity and autism, which is actually happening right now on our social media. So please stay connected. Please follow us on our social media and on social media of our partners. You will find a lot of valuable information there. The cycle of 5 open webinars, and the first webinar is happening actually right now. AI Inclusion Tank platform, which is kind of digital hub where you can find the information about inclusive education, 2 training courses, mentorship program, AI-based toolkit activities, which is, I would say, collection of AI-based tips and materials to be used by teachers. And finally, interactive guidelines on ethical use of artificial intelligence. So again, I think that these activities are really interesting, are quite ambitious. We have 3 years to complete them, but to be honest, I cannot wait it. All right, so I think that we are ready to start the main part of the webinar. Its title is Addressing Autism and Neurodiversity. And I have a great pleasure to introduce our guest, our speaker, our expert, Ms. Magdalena. Magdalena, once again, thank you for accepting our invitation. And please enjoy handing over to you, Magdalena.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. And thank you very much for the invitation. And if you are here as a parent, a teacher, or specialist working with learners on autism spectrum, you are probably standing in place full of questions. What now? What really helps? What do we start? And often, very often, the hardest part is not autism itself, it's confusion around it. Too much information, too many options, too many methods. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, there is a learner and adults who truly want to help. So today, my goal is to help organize the chaos, to better understand what neurodiversity really is, including autism, what learners actually struggle with, and how we can support development in a way that is functional, meaningful, and possible in real life. I truly believe that real support begins with understanding. Could you please? Yes, thank you. So my name is Magdalena Stefańska-Kazmierczak. Thank you again for invitation. I started my career as a teacher in early childhood and primary education, working with typically developing children. And I remember those days very well. I would walk into the classroom, say good morning, take out notebooks, and you know what? They just did it. Simple, right? Then life took me to Ireland. At the beginning, at first, I didn't speak English, so my job had nothing to do with education. After 8 months, I had a very clear thought. This is not my place. So I made a decision. Either I would learn English and I go back to teaching in Ireland, or I would go back to Poland and return to my profession there. So I applied for a job. I went to the interview and I got it. I was so excited to be back in education that I completely missed one small detail, the full name of the school. It was a primary school, but the second part of the name was for children with autism. And that's how everything changed, actually. Suddenly, the strategies I knew stopped working. The things I used to be, that used to be obvious were no longer obvious at all. The school used ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. At first, I didn't understand it. To be honest, it didn't sit well with me. I felt real internal conflict between being a teacher, a mom, a parent of typically developing children, and now a beginner behavior analyst. But at the same time, I was eager to know, eager enough to start learning. So I completed a 3-year program of ABA, 1 year at Trinity College in Dublin, and 2 years at Florida Institute of Technology. And somewhere along that path, things started to connect. especially after I discovered the pyramid approach as functional use of ABA. I was about understanding that we teach, what we teach, why we teach first, and how to make it meaningful. So that is when I realized that this perspective allows me to be not just a teacher, but maybe a more effective teacher for children with autism with ASD. So I came back to Poland and I brought something important with me. I brought to Poland PECS and the pyramid approach. And for the past 15 years, I've been the clinical director of pyramid approach educational consultants in Poland, working with individuals from early childhood through the late adulthood. I also run educational settings, preschools and schools, because I strongly believe that quality education for children with autism, for people with autism, is not only possible, it should be the standard. So what we will cover today, can we please change the slide? Thank you. Today we are going to connect theory with our real life. We will talk about what autism really is, what communication difficulties really look like in practice, why behavior and communication are deeply connected, and how the pyramid approach helps us build meaningful, functional support for learners across different ages. So let's start with neurodiversity. Let's think about neurodiversity like different operating systems. For example, Android and iOS. Both are excellent. Both work very well, but they are not the same and they are not fully compatible. And most importantly, neither of them is broken. We won't try to fix iOS to make it Android, and we don't fix Android to make it iOS. We learn how to use them. And if you are used to one system, you need to put some effort to understand the other. Otherwise, it simply won't work. I remember when I got my first MacBook, I had always worked on Windows. Did I like it at the beginning? No. Was it comfortable? Not really. But that didn't matter, because if I wanted to use MacBook, I had to learn a different system. And this is exactly the same with neurodiversity. Different does not mean worse. Different means we need a different way of understanding and teaching. Neurodiversity typically includes neurological and developmental differences that affects how people think, learn, communicate, and experience the world. The most commonly included are ASD, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, Tourette syndrome, sensory processing disorders, and many others. The concept of neurodiversity suggests that these differences should not be viewed solely as deficits, but as a natural part of human diversity. At the same time, neurotypical individuals are also part of neurodiversity because it encompasses the full spectrum of human neurological functioning. So we don't try to fix the system, we rather learn how to work with it. So today, let's zoom in on autism. So what is autism? Very simply, we define ASD, autism, through two main areas: difficulties in social communication and interaction, and restricted repetitive patterns of behavior and interests. And one key thing, autism is spectrum, so every child is different. Now, everyone knows the definition, but the real question is, what do we actually do with this definition? because knowing the definition is not the same as knowing how to work with a child. And now let's take the definition and turn it into practice, in something we can actually use in everyday situation, in the classroom, at home, and in real life. So first thing, imitation, very important. Typically, developing children learn mainly through imitation. They watch others, they copy, they see what their peers are doing, and they just follow. For example, in a classroom, students begin a new art activity. The teacher starts showing materials, other students begin cutting, folding, drawing. Most learners simply watch others and join it. But a student, a learner with ASD may sit and wait, not because they don't want to participate, but because they don't automatically learn by observing group. Another situation, group work. Students learn social behavior by watching each other. Gosia, that is the previous slide, if I can ask you. That is still the thank you very much. So students learn social behavior by watching each other, how to take turns, how to join, how to respond, but student with ASD doesn't pick it up. They are in the class, but they are not really participating. Or another example, PE class, the teacher shows an exercise. Most students copy it, but student with SAD doesn't follow or does something completely different. And this is the key point. The student is surrounded by models, but they are not learning from them. So the group does not teach them. Many social behaviors that neurotypical students learn naturally through observation and imitation often need to be taught directly. And now, in real life, this is where a big conflict appears. Parents want their children to be included with typically developing peers. And system also pushes for inclusion, and that is absolutely understandable. But very often, teachers and support staff don't fully understand this difficulty. They expect the child to learn from the group, but the child simply cannot do that yet. And the learner will not just figure it out. We just need to help him. And this is the moment when the labels very often appear. She is resistant. They don't want to cooperate. But very often this is not opposition. This is a difficulty with understanding, navigating the social situation independently. So what happens? The child is physically included, but not really learning. And this leads us to something very important. This is one of the most basic accommodation we have to do. We cannot rely on imitation. We have to teach directly, clearly, step by step. It happens when we teach intentionally. Another thing from the slide, have a look, eye contact. Very often, this one is the first thing people notice. They don't look at me. And very quickly, it becomes a goal. We need to teach eye contact. But from our perspective, we need to ask a different question. What is the function of the eye contact? In typical development, eye contact is not a goal on its own. It's part of communication. A child looks at you because they want something, because they want to share something, because they want to connect. So eye contact appears as a result of communication, not a prerequisite. Now, when we look at many individuals with autism, eye contact may be limited, may be very uncomfortable or different. And some of these people with this difficulty, they some of this difficulty can last for many years, sometimes for a lifetime. And at the same time, these individuals can become highly skilled, successful professionals. So eye contact, eye contact cannot be treated as something that must happen first before we move on. And this is where mistakes often happen. We try to teach eye contact directly. Look at me, eyes here. But if eye contact has no meaning for the child, it becomes just another task, something to perform, not something to use. And this is not functional. From pyramid perspective, we do something different. We focus on building communication. We create a situation where the child needs another person, where communication has a clear purpose, and then very often eye contact appears naturally because now it has a function. So again, this is one of the key accommodations. We do not force eye contact. We do not treat it as a condition for learning. We build communication and allow eye contact to emerge when it becomes meaningful. So we would recommend don't teach the form, teach the function. And the third one from the slide, social rewards. And this is a real game changer. Very important point, and probably the most important one when we talked about social deficit. It's very limited effectiveness of social rewards. And here we move slightly into a more analytical perspective. So, typically developing children learn new skills because of the feedback they receive from other people, from a parent, from a teacher, from someone. Let's take a simple example. A 1-year-old child is playing with their grandmother. At some point, while playing, the child says something like Baba. And can you imagine the reaction of grandpa? The grandmother is so happy. She smiles, reacts, celebrates. And this reaction, this joy becomes feedback for the child. So we would say that it increases the likelihood that the child will say it again and again. And this is how learning begins. A behavior appears, and because it leads to a social reaction, it happens more often. Social joy, attention, connection, this become the driving force for learning. But for many learners with ASD, this mechanism does not work in the same way. Social reinforcement is often not strong enough to motivate the child to engage in learning, in task, in interaction. And this is where real problem begins, because the child, the learner, can learn, but only if match the right type of motivation. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. During one of my workshop, a mother started crying. She said, "My son doesn't love me." I asked her, "Why do you think that?" And she told me a story. Her 14-year-old son didn't want to do homework. She tried, she kept pushing, she even started doing it for him. Teachers were complaining that he wasn't working independently. One day, she couldn't take it anymore. She started crying. The boy looked at her and asked, "Mommy, why are you crying?" And she said, "Because you don't want to do your homework." He said, "Ah, okay." And he walked away. For her, it was a clear message. He doesn't care. He doesn't love me. But from our perspective, this is something else. Her emotions were simply not reinforcing enough to change his behavior. So I asked her, what would have to happen for your son to actually do the homework? And she said, "I don't know." I said, I think you do. After a moment, she said, I would have to promise that we will go ride a scooter. And that's it. That's the difference. Not emotion, not approval, but something concrete, something meaningful. And when I asked her why she doesn't do that, she said, because people will say I'm buying him off, or that he only does things when he gets something. And this is a huge cultural barrier. But here is the reality. Many individuals with autism are less responsive to social reinforcement. And we have two choices. We either accept it and build the right environment, or inclusion will not work. Because without motivation, learning does not happen. And when we ignore this, we start pushing, demanding, expecting, forcing, fighting, and over time we become tired, frustrated, and overwhelmed because nothing seems to work. And this is exactly when challenging behaviors appear very often. So, from our perspective, we do not rely on social reward only. We identify what is meaningful for the child and we build the learning on that. Of course, our goal is to gradually establish social reinforcement as something motivating and meaningful. But this is a process, not the starting point, regardless of the learner's age. And one more very important thing. This is not about love. This is message for parents. This is not about relationships. These are two completely different systems. A child may love their parent deeply and still not be motivated by their emotional reactions. So again, this is not about changing the child. This is about understanding how they learn. And of course, I may like it or not like it. I may agree with it or feel uncomfortable with it. But unfortunately, that's not the point. The point is we are here to build a functional repertoire of skills in young people so they can become as independent as possible. And we do it through motivation, a type of motivation that may look different from what we see in neurotypical individuals, but is absolutely essential for learning to happen. Okay, another thing now is about communication. Another major challenge for individuals with autism is communication. This is the second key area that significantly impacts development. And when I say difficulty, I don't mean that these skills cannot develop. I mean that they do not develop automatically. So our role is not to wait, but to identify these difficulties and actively teach the missing skills. Because again, what we see here is a different developmental pattern. So what do we mean by communication? When we talk about autism, communication difficulties are not defined simply as a lack of speech. Many individuals speak very well. They may have clear articulation, rich vocabulary, but they do not use language to communicate effectively. They may talk, but not communicate. And sometimes they can express certain needs very well, but not others. And this is often very confusing because we assume if a person can speak, they can communicate. But that's not always true. So when we talk about communication difficulties, we need to look at two things: expressing needs and also understanding others. Communication is always two-way. There is a speaker and a listener. And our students, our learners may have difficulties in both roles. One of the most important challenges is initiation communication. I mean, spontaneous communication. We often see students who can answer questions perfectly, students who can repeat what we say, but they do not ask spontaneously for what they need. Let's see another example. I worked with a boy in 4th grade. He was doing very well. He spoke fluently. He won many competitions. Everything looked fine, but suddenly he started swearing in class. I thought it's his age, but the problem was growing. So the teacher asked me for help. So I went into the classroom to observe what was happening. And what happened? One example. The teacher wrote something on the board. Students were copying. The boy didn't finish in time, and suddenly he swore. The teacher came over and asked, "What's wrong? What's wrong, David?" And he said, "I didn't finish copying." She gave him another student's notebook so he could copy the missing part. She helped him. Problem solved. Another situation the same day. Later, group work. He couldn't open a drawer. He struggled and swore again. The teacher came and asked him, "David, what's wrong?" And he answered, "I can't open it." And she helped him. This happened many times. After the day was over, I talked to the teacher, and the teacher saw swearing, only swearing. The teacher saw a problem behavior problem. But from our analytical perspective, this was something different. It reflected a lack of spontaneous help seeking. He could explain the problem. He talked very well, so he could explain the problem, but only after being asked. He was able to communicate, but not to initiate communication. So what worked for David? Swearing, because it made the adult come and ask a question, and only then he could communicate. So the problem was not swearing. The problem was he didn't know how to ask for help spontaneously without first being asked a question. And this completely changed how we approach the situation. We don't just try to reduce the behavior, we identify the missing skill and we teach it. So please let me give you one more example to clearly show what spontaneous communication is and what is not. Let's imagine I'm a teacher in a preschool. I bring popcorn. Why? Because I need to organize many occasions to develop communication. So today, the tool for developing communication is a fresh prepared popcorn. I bring popcorn, it smells amazing, all children want it. 3 students come to me. The first one says, "I want popcorn." And I said, "Oh, you ask me so nicely," and I give it. The second one comes close, tries to grab it. I ask, "What do you want?" And he says, "I want popcorn." And I said, "Oh, you asked me so nicely," and I give it. The third one comes, tries to grab it. I ask, no answer, so I model. Say, "I want popcorn." And he repeats, "I want popcorn." And I said, "Oh, you told me so nicely you want popcorn." And I give it. So now all 3 students said, "I want popcorn." All 3 got popcorn, but these were 3 completely different verbal behaviors. The first one was spontaneous communication. The second, response to a question. And the third was imitation. And here is the key point. These skills do not generalize automatically. A child who can answer a question will not automatically ask spontaneously. A child with ASD who can repeat will not automatically communicate spontaneously. And this has huge consequences, because a child who only communicates when prompted is dependent on adults, on questions, on support. And when that support is not there, the child still has needs, but no way to express them. And what happens then? Very often, again, challenging behavior appears, because behaviors works. It gets attention, it gets help. So if we want to reduce challenging behavior, the fastest and the most effective way is to teach spontaneous communication, not only answering, not only repeating, but initiation. And this is where many interventions fail, because they focus on structure, on question, on responses, but not on initiation. And without initiation, there is no independence. Okay, so can we please move on the next slide? Restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. In autism, these behaviors are not random. They often reflect a need for predictability, regulation, and sense of control. This is how the world becomes more manageable. What does it look like in practice again? Repetitive movements, repetitive speech, a strong need for routines and sameness, difficulty with unexpected change, very narrow on very intense interests, inflexibility in thinking or problem solving, and often very different sensory experience, sounds, touch, movement, light. And this is very important. From the outside, adults often see difficult behavior again. But from a student perspective, the question is not how do we stop this? The question is, what is the behavior doing for the learner? Let me give you an example. A learner always sits in the same place in the classroom every day. One day, someone else is sitting there, and suddenly the learner becomes upset, refuses to work, maybe cries, maybe escalates. From the outside, this may look like oppositional behavior, but functionally, this is often a loss of predictability, a sudden loss of control in an environment that already feels difficult to manage. And this is where our response matters. We can push the learner through the situation and demand flexibility immediately, or we can teach flexibility the same way we teach another skills, step by step, with preparation, with visual support, with predictability, with emotional safety. Not by removing every difficulty, but gradually building the learner's ability to cope with change successfully. And this is the key difference. We do not focus only on reducing behavior. We focus on understanding what skill is missing, what support is needed, and how to build independence over time. So, what autism is not? One of the biggest problems in autism is not autism itself, but the myths around it. Because these myths shape expectation, decision, and very often the quality of support. Autism is not a mental illness, is not caused by parenting, and it does not mean a lack of emotion, relationship, or potential. Very often, the real difficulty appears when the environment is not properly adapted to the learner's need. So, what do we know about families of children with autism? Can we have another slide, please? Thank you. After receiving diagnosis, families often shift into survival mode. Suddenly, they are expected to understand system, make decision, organize therapies, support education, and somehow still function as a family. And very often, what they receive is information, diagnosis, but not necessarily guidance. From my perspective, families do not need to have their parenting fixed. They need a partnership, respect, clear direction, and practical support that actually fits real life. Because support should never focus only on the learner, it should support the whole family system. And this support has to involve over time, from early childhood all the way into adult life, independence, relationship, and employment. And one of the strongest protective factors is still human connection. A supportive school, competent professionals, understanding people around the family, because no family should have navigate autism alone. So what do we know about early intervention? When we talk about early intervention, people often focus only on one thing: age. How early did therapy start? Was it early enough? But from my perspective, again, early intervention is not only about time. It's about priorities, about understanding what should be taught first, because development is not random. Some skills create the foundation for many other skills. And if these foundations are weak, the learner may continue developing, but with increasing gaps in independence, communication, learning, and social functioning. So this is also where another very important question appears. It's ever too late to teach? And our answer is no, it's never too late to build meaningful skills. We work with learners from early childhood through adulthood. People continue learning throughout life. But the later we start, the more intentional and functional our teaching must become, because older learners do not need childish activities. They need skills that increase independence, communication, and quality of life. So early intervention matters enormously, but meaningful teaching does not end at childhood. And this is incredibly important for families, teachers, and adult learners themselves to hear. So, if we already know what autism is, if we understand some of the key facts about autism, we can finally move to the next question. What actually helps? Because this is the moment where many parents and professionals start feeling overwhelmed. They understand what autism is, but still don't know where to start, what to prioritize, and how to organize support in a meaningful way. There are many methods, many recommendations, and honestly, this is happening all over the world. And this is exactly what Dr. Andy Bondi noticed years ago when he was directing a large organization providing services for individuals with autism in Delaware. He observed something very important. Every professional had a different idea of what good therapy should look like. Teachers, psychologists, speech therapists, parents. Each person was guided by their own education, their own experience, their own training, and instead of consistency, there was a chaos. I think many of us know exactly what that feels like. One specialist says something. One specialist says one thing, another says something completely different. And families are left wondering, so what we are actually supposed to do? So Dr. Mondi gathered together methods and strategies supported by evidence and practice, and he organized them into something simply and practical. We call that the pyramid approach. Not as another miracle therapy, but as a guide, a way of understanding what creates a good educational environment. What should come first? What matters most? And what foundation must be in place before we expect learners to succeed? So in many ways, the pyramid approach became a practical compass for meaningful support, a kind of professional cheat sheet for teachers, therapists, and families. And this is actually not just a philosophy. Research strongly supports the idea. The idea that ineffective communication, low motivation, and non-functional educational goals can significantly increase the risk of challenging behavior. Of course, these are not the only reason why behavior occurs, but they are very, very important risk factors. And this is exactly what the bottom of the pyramid reflects. Because from a pyramid perspective, if challenging behavior appears, very often it means that one of the basic elements is missing. Maybe the learner does not have an effective way to communicate. Maybe the motivation is too low. Maybe the goals are not functional or meaningful for that person. And this is completely changes how we respond to behavior, because the first intervention is not simply trying to stop the behavior. The first step is to identify what is missing at the base of the pyramid and repair that element. So we ask, do we need better communication? Do we need stronger motivation? Or do we need more functional goals? Because when those foundations improve, behavior improves with them. What I personally value very much about the pyramid approach is that it brings structure. It helps organize support step by step. And very often it helps different professionals finally work in the same direction. Teacher, SLPs, psychologists, parents. Instead of everyone working separately, we start building one consistent educational environment. And the logic is very clear. First, we try to understand why is the behavior happening, and then we ask what skills are truly functional and worth teaching so that difficult behaviors become unnecessary. And one more very important thing, data. In the pyramid approach, we do not rely on the intuition, on the feeling that this seems to be working. We observe, we measure, we analyze, and we check whether what we are doing actually help the learner. So functional approach. Why is functional approach key when working with a person with autism? That is the key element of the base of pyramid also. So one of the most important questions we should ask ourselves is not, can the learner do this during therapy, during my session, but rather, will this skill actually help them in a real life? Because in autism, many skills do not develop spontaneously in the same way as they do in neurotypical learners. So we have to be very intentional about what we choose and teach first. Why is from a functional perspective, we prioritize skills that first reduce frustration, support communication, increase independence, and reduce challenging behavior, and help the learner participate more successfully in everyday life, also in lessons, also in school environment. Because functional teaching is not about collecting skills, it's about building a life with more autonomy, more connection, and more opportunities to participate in the world. And this is naturally bring us to another very important direction in modern autism support, which is called NDBI, Naturalistic Developmental Behavioral Interventions. Today, NDBI, together with a well-matched AAC system for learners who do not use speech, of course, is considered one of the most evidence-based approaches supporting communication development. So now the name, NDBI, Naturalistic Development and Behavioral Intervention, sounds very scientific, but the idea itself is actually very simple. NDBI means we teach communication and other skills where real life happens, not only at table, not only during therapy session, but during play, during meals, during walking, getting dressed, during preschool activities, schools activities, daily routines, and relationship with others people. And this is a very important shift because instead of creating learning separated from life, we use everyday situation to teach meaningful skills. So rather than asking how many hours of therapy does the child have, we being asking how many opportunities to communicate and learn does the child experience throughout the day. And this actually changes everything because children learn best when they are interested, motivated, emotionally engaged, able to immediately use the skill they are learning. And this is also why NDBI fits so naturally with pyramid approach. And both these approaches focus on functional communication, motivation, initiation, as I said, learning in real life situation, and teaching throughout the entire day, not only during therapy time. And this is something I often say to parents and teachers. Children do not always need more specialist session. Very often they need more meaningful learning opportunities during into everyday life. So before we finish, I want to leave you with one very important idea. What can you do today? What can you start doing tomorrow? Take a moment and think about your learner or your child. Do they truly have all these communication skills? Not only during therapy, not only when prompted, but in the life. And if someone of these skills are missing, don't wait for them to develop automatically. Plan them, teach them, create opportunities to use them. Because when communication grows, very often frustration decreases, behavior improves, relationships become easier, and quality of life changes for everyone involved. So we have 9 critical communication skills One group is a speaker skills, and we want to check whether your child can request for key items independently, spontaneously, if he can or she can request for help, for break, and whether she can answer to the question, do you want this, and answer yes or no. So those are expressive communication skills, which means those when our child need to use where it's a speaker in communication. And there are another part of communication skills, receptive. So when the child is a listener, so we want him to react what we say to him. So we want to check whether a child, whether my learner can respond to wait or no, can follow verbal and visual instruction, can do transition, and also can act in accordingly to the plan. Those are very, very important skills. And this is true regardless of the learner's age. A 4-year-old, a teenager, or an adult learner all need effective communication to participate more independently in life. So if listening to me made you think, okay, maybe this makes some sense, but what comes next? I would say you don't have to know everything right now. One step is enough. We are here to help make sense of all of it without chaos, without guessing, but based on what truly works. Because this really is possible. If this feels like the right direction for you, reach out to us. We will start with conversation, no pressure, just practical support. And you will see that it is impossible isn't just a slogan, it's something that can truly begin to happen. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, we had a microphone problem. So I want to thank everyone that participated in this webinar, and especially thank our Polish partners and our speaker, Magdalena. You did a wonderful job. It was a very interesting webinar. So thank you very much for your time and your expertise. I ask all participants, please, to scan this QR code and fill in the feedback form. So the feedback form is very important for us and for the project, so that we can monitor, let's say, the efforts that we are making, and what people think about what we are doing and about the project results. In the feedback form, you will see that we ask for your email as well. This is because we will use the email to send you the certificates. So the certificates of the webinar cycle will be provided at the end of all 5 webinars, so around July. So please fill in the feedback form so that we can make sure that you receive your certificate. I also want to remind you that our next webinar will be on the 15th of May at 3:30 Central European Time, like today. And it will be about inclusive language and behaviors in the school environment. So make sure to put it in your calendar so you don't miss it. It will be organized by our Serbian partners. So we hope to see you there. I will also send you the feedback form by email tomorrow morning. So you can do it now or tomorrow. Just remember that it's important for us, okay? And also to receive the certificate. So thank you all again, and I hope to see you in the next webinar. Thank you to Magdalena once again.